Hey guys, it's April 15th, Wednesday at 3:45. I wanted to do a video about language, words. One word in particular, actually. I've talked before in my videos about, maybe I haven't done it directly, but I know that I've mentioned at different times that I think that language is super important, and the reality is that the language that we decide to use and the meanings that we attach to our language constructs and creates our society. And we may think that it is the other way around, but we have been cultured and taught to understand ourselves and other people and groups of people and things that are around us through meanings that we've attached to these words. And I think trans folks or genderqueer folks have an understanding of this that is much deeper than those people who are not forced by circumstances or through their own process of understanding themselves to critically look at language and the constructs of language. So for the purposes of this video, obviously I could talk about a lot of different things, but what I want to talk about is the word transgender as opposed to transgendered, and why for me the term transgendered is one that I feel like as a community we need to work really hard to eliminate from our vocabulary, and we need to call it out when we see it in academics and medical professions and so forth. And this came about from my friend Jackie, who was doing some reading, and in the reading, and it was from 2000, there was a lot, over and over the word transgendered was used as opposed to transgender, and she asked me to help her explain why that was offensive and inappropriate language, and definitely not preferred by most trans folks. And I talked to her a little bit about it, and I realized that I had a very clear and strong feeling about it, but I wasn't able to articulate that argument very well. So last night I did some research on it and was able to better construct my argument. And so I just simply wanted to share what that is for you all, and if no other reason, for you all to kind of think about our language and the words that we choose to identify other people and identify ourselves, and the meanings behind those. So this is just my personal take on transgendered versus transgender. I very much prefer transgender when referring to myself, or even transsexual, depending upon the audience in which I'm speaking to. But when you put ed on the word transgender, two things happens. It makes it past tense, and it also makes it passive and weak. So when I look at who I am or myself, how I understand myself or my process, I do not feel that I am in any way past tense. I don't feel like I've ceased to exist in the present form. So that's one reason why transgendered does not feel appropriate as a word to label myself as, and it's why when I hear it or see it in other places, I tend to acknowledge that I feel like that's an inappropriate way to use the word or to describe me or other trans folks. The other piece of that is that I do not consider the concept of transgender, transsexualism, transgressing gender, calling out the gender binary, any of those things and a lot of other things. I don't consider that something that is deserving of a word that is considered to be weak or passive. And so when we are using a word to label somebody, or we are labeling ourselves with a word, I think that we have something to gain from making sure that we're not using the tense of the word with a tense that has weakness in it. The other thing that happens when you put ed on the word transgender is that it takes it from a noun to an adjective. As a person, I cannot be an adjective. I have to be a noun. And so when we are looking at the idea of the word of transgender or transsexualism, we don't take other words that describe people or label people or categorize people, and we don't make them past tense. We don't put them in passive or weak forms, and we don't change nouns into adjectives. What I can say that I do agree with is that being gendered is appropriate. I have been gendered, and I am gendering myself in a certain way, but overall as a human being and as an identity that falls within the same category for me as male gender, masculine gender, female gender, that is different than how I've been gendered. So I don't know. There's traffic going, and I've said this numerous times in my videos. I get super distracted, so I apologize if I'm looking kind of spacey, but so that's just like a really short, easy version of my take on transgender versus transgendered. I would love your guys' feedback and your thoughts on it. If you have something that's differing, or if you agree, or whatever it is. So I think that's all that I really wanted to say about that. All right, later. So along the lines of language and word and how it impacts us and our meanings and the constructs that we make of it, I was in class the other day and we were talking about this concept of microaggression, and I think this goes along with the previous video that I just made about the person in the restaurant who I felt was threatening, or I perceived a threat by them, and I think that falls under this definition of microaggression. There was a woman who was at the conference that I spoke at a couple of weeks ago that talked about microaggression within the construct of racism and ethnocentric sorts of behaviors, and she defined microaggression like paper cuts. They hurt and they are annoying, but they lack overt bleeding, overt injury that would cause people around to take notice or pay attention. But they are injuries nonetheless, and they are annoyances and cause pain just the same. And so when I started thinking about that in context to my life, our lives, and just within the framework of my trans identity, I thought about, there's been a lot of conversation over the course of the year or so year and a half that I've been part of YouTube, about pronouns and names, and does it matter, and why does it matter, and I remember some time ago Carson had made a video about it, and I had responded that I would argue that when we decide that we need to just get over when people use incorrect pronouns or incorrect names, that is actually internalized transphobia as a result of being socialized in a way to make the dominant culture feel comfortable and for us to continue to sacrifice ourselves. Whole nother topic. My point with this microaggression sort of thing is that we as trans folks experience microaggression all the time, and I think that we all would readily acknowledge that and agree to that, but maybe we don't always consider or look at the impact or the long-term effects of ongoing microaggression that we experience at the hands of other people, sometimes intentionally, overtly, and sometimes unintentionally and covertly. So, for me, earlier on in my transition, when there was a lot of pronoun mix-up or inappropriate name use, I remember in one video talking about it felt like I was getting sucker punched in the gut and the wind was knocked out of me. But now, using the language of microaggression, what I understand is that my entire life, I was on the receiving end of microaggression, tiny paper cuts. And when you get one single paper cut, it's like, it hurts, and it's a very painful sort of thing. But when you have, if you were to visualize or imagine paper cuts all over your body, the level of pain, the level of discomfort, and how that would drastically impact and impede your life in a very huge way. And it doesn't require a gigantic overt injury like a broken bone or lacerations or all of that sort of stuff to be harmed or affected or impacted by injury to self. And so if I were to think about all of the tiny paper cuts that I've received over the course of my life, just within the regards of my trans identity, I'm able to arrive at a place that is much more understanding and much more compassionate for myself about why things are difficult or why it's frustrating when my identity or who I say I am is questioned by culture or society or people at large or individual people in my world. And over the last year, why it has been so important for me to assert my male identity, is that for me that's the process of self-healing all of those millions of paper cuts that have been all over my body, and that I would probably be welcomed with empathy and sympathy if some overt action had occurred where I'd been bashed or or just overtly discriminated against or something along those lines by people, they'd be able to say that's horrible, that's a horrible thing, you shouldn't have to go through that. But when violence occurs to us in micro forms, i.e. paper cuts that are not large and visible, we tend to not get a lot of empathy and sympathy from other people, and we in turn do that to ourselves. We tend to devalue our pain and devalue our experiences as if they don't matter, in the same sort of a way that overt macro aggression would. So, just some thoughts. All right, later.